Hey guys, and welcome back to Street Sense, a podcast where we're committed to changing the public's views on homelessness. If you're new here, my name is Sandra, and as always, I'm joined by my spectacular co-hosts, Zoe and AJ.
Hi!
If you've been with us before, you already know that Street Sense is all about exploring the real issues surrounding homelessness, whether they're tough to talk about or moments that inspire hope. And we talk about the ways we can all make a difference. In today's episode, we're taking a closer look at homelessness in the downtown Eastside of Vancouver. We'll also dive into how homelessness unfairly affects Indigenous people and minorities. And of course, we'll be sharing the latest news you need to know and highlight another incredible individual who's creating positive change in the fight against homelessness. So, grab your headphones, settle in, and let's jump into episode 3 of Street Sense.
Alright, so in the past 2 episodes, we've been sharing parts of our interview with Jean Swanson, and today we'll be watching the final segment. Jean has been such an inspiring voice, shedding light on the root causes of homelessness, poverty, and systematic inequality. So, let's listen to the rest of the interview, and afterwards, we'll take some time to debrief, reflect on her key points, and share our own thoughts. So, let's dive in.
People just get richer and then poor people get even more poor. I was curious about your views on the decriminalization of drug use and and clean needle stations and stuff on the downtown east side. Do you think that could be helpful for people trying to get out of addiction, or would it make it worse? What do you think?
The drugs on the street are really poison, and people would get a poison drug and then they would pass out and they'd have to Narcan them and give them oxygen and stuff. And they lost a lot of friends because people died. 6 people a day die in the province, saving these people from having to use poison street drugs. And when I was on council, they asked me if I would come and hand out safe drugs with them one day. So I did. So I think what we need is a safe supply of drugs. There's this guy named Guy Felicella who used to be addicted to drugs, but he now goes around giving speeches about how we need treatment and safe supply. And he had a tweet the other day that said, alcohol companies actually advertise to get people to drink a substance that causes cancer, causes heart disease, causes people to get violent sometimes. Yet, when people use drugs, they get thrown in jail or whatever. And if you use alcohol, it's perfectly okay to advertise about alcohol. So there's a real disconnect there. And if you talk to the people that use drugs, they say what they need is a safe supply. And the other advantage that would have besides saving lives is it would get the criminals out of the system. You wouldn't have gangs going around selling drugs. You'd do it at a liquor store or something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Most people who use drugs are not addicted to them.
How so?
There are people like you or me who try it out once in a while. A friend says, oh, let's try this. The coroner, Lisa Lapointe, the former coroner, I think she said there was 225,000 people that use drugs in BC, and only a small portion of them are actually addicted. So if you wanted to go to a doctor and get a prescription for a drug because you had substance use disorder, you wouldn't be able, most people who use drugs wouldn't be able to do it because they don't have substance use disorder. They just do it occasionally, which would be another reason to have a safe supply. Just like with alcohol, there is the argument that when you increase access, you increase problems. So the thing with drugs is you'd regulate it, right? You wouldn't allow advertising. You'd have an age limit. You'd have, a quality control so people would know what they were getting.
Wrap up this interview, we wanted to ask you one more question, and it is how do you think young people like us, how can we raise awareness for the homeless crisis, and what can we do to make a difference?
Podcast.
Of course.
Awesome that you're doing that.
you so
It's
much.
awesome that you're interested. It's really great. So I remember going to the opening of the first food bank in Vancouver. And I remember the people that were running it said, this is only temporary. And now the food banks are saying that they have more people than ever before. Giving help to people is really great. It's really needed. It's awesome if you do it, but it won't end homelessness or poverty. Got to go another step further. And like the podcast is good because it's dealing with public opinion, which is necessary to push the politicians in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
But thank you so much for giving us your time today. Like, I think we've learned a lot. Thank you so
You guys are awesome.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
All right, and that's a wrap for Jean Swanson. You know, I'm grateful that we had the opportunity to interview her because she had a lot of great points she shared with us.
Oh yeah, I totally agreed when she was talking about how alcohol is so normalized in society today, but I don't agree about how she compared alcohol with the street drugs in the downtown Eastside. Jean Swanson talked about how advertising alcohol as something that everybody can do casually is the same as having safe supply of drug handouts supplied by the government. But really, the difference between drugs and alcohol is that it's more common for someone to drink casually rather than do hard drugs casually.
Yeah, it depends what kind of drugs we're referring to though, because for some less hard drugs, you could definitely do them casually, and they can even help you with some ailments, like marijuana can help with chronic pain and anxiety. With harder drugs that are taking lives, it's usually all or nothing. You can't just do a little bit of meth casually at a family dinner, but it's acceptable and normalized to have a glass of wine or beer.
Oh yeah, another thing she mentioned was how most people who use drugs aren't addicted, and that a lot of people who use drugs can get off of them easily and use them casually. And she was referring to the drugs that were being handed out as safe supply. But I disagree with that, because most people that will be needing access to safe supply provided by the government are addicted because of the drug's high intensity, like opioids. Opioids are known to have incredible intense withdrawal symptoms that can even kill you in some cases. These kind of drugs are definitely very addictive, and people do have substance abuse disorder on the downtown east side because they're using drugs so much that they die because of it.
Oh yeah, and she was also talking about SROs, which actually leads us to our next segment, which is some current events. So, I'm sure you guys saw this. The Vancouver mayor just announced a freeze on new supportive housing across the city. They say it's temporary, but I don't know, it feels pretty big.
Yeah, I saw that. Crazy, right? Vancouver already has such a huge issue with homelessness, and now the timing feels really off. I mean, freezing supportive housing, that's not gonna help things get better.
It's kind of mind-blowing, honestly. I get that there's a lot of pressure from residents and businesses, especially in certain neighborhoods, but freezing housing projects, it doesn't seem like the right solution. It just feels like they're putting up a wall instead of actually addressing the problem head on.
Exactly! The mayor's position is that they need to re-evaluate the zoning laws, but doesn't that sound more like stalling them than actually solving the issue? Supportive housing isn't just about building buildings, it's about creating safe spaces where people can get back on their feet.
Yeah, and it's not just a housing issue, it's also about mental health services, addiction recovery programs, and just general support systems. You can't just throw people into apartments and expect everything to magically get better. It's a complicated system of events.
For sure, it's not like there aren't other factors at play. A lot of public oppositions come from fear about crime or poverty values, but this freeze almost feels like it's rewarding those concerns rather than doing the hard work of finding solutions that address the actual problem of homelessness.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked they didn't have a stronger plan before announcing this freeze. I mean, you're right, housing is a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the whole picture. Like, if you build houses but don't have the proper services, like addiction counseling, job training, mental health support, then people are just going to fall through the cracks.
And let's not forget that supportive housing is actually cost effective in the long run. It can lower healthcare costs, reduce emergency services use, and help people re-enter society in a meaningful way. So freezing these projects could actually make things more expensive down the road.
Exactly, Zoe. A lot of people don't realize that when you're dealing with homelessness, you're also dealing with emergency rooms, police calls, shelters, and like a lot more. And all of that comes with a price tag. And sometimes it's cheaper in the long run to just put the resources into permanent support housing where people get the help they need.
So, if they're freezing new projects, what happens to all the people who are supposed to benefit from those houses? Are we just pushing them to the side? That's what I don't get. If we already have a crisis, how does putting the brakes on things help at all?
It feels like a short-term fix to a long-term problem, right? It's like slapping a band-aid on a broken arm. It just doesn't hold up when you look at the bigger picture. And what happens next year, like 2 years from now? They'll still be playing catch-up while more people fall through the cracks.
That's the part I don't understand. How does a freeze lead to anything productive? It just feels like more of the same lack of progress we've seen for years. You know, maybe a year ago or something, you could say we were still in a wait and see phase. But like, we're way past that and we need bold action now, not delays.
Yeah, and the freeze also brings up a bigger issue. Is the city just trying to avoid conflict? It seems like they're backing down from the pressure of certain vocal groups who don't want supportive housing in their neighborhoods. But isn't that the whole point of having a mayor or city council? To make tough decisions that help people even if it's not popular?
That's the thing, right? If you're an elected official, you're supposed to have a vision for the city that includes making decisions that aren't always the easiest. If every tough decision just gets pushed aside because it's too controversial, you're not really leading, you're just catering to whoever's yelling the loudest.
That's such a good point. I think the problem is a lot of people who oppose supportive housing don't fully understand what these projects actually impose. They're not just shelters, they're places where people can stabilize, access resources, and begin rebuilding their lives. So people often hear supporting housing and think it's just another kind of homeless shelter, but it's so much more than that.
Right? And it's frustrating when we focus on the wrong things, like fears about poverty values or crime, without thinking about the human cost. At the end of the day, these are people's lives we're talking about. They need homes where they can feel safe and have a shot at rebuilding, not just being left on the streets.
I think there's a real disconnect between what politicians see and what people are actually experiencing on the street. The mayor and the city council might be hearing from the neighborhood groups that don't want supportive housing near them, but reality is those neighbors aren't the ones waking up on a sidewalk every day.
Yeah, exactly. I think most people who don't have to worry about where they'll sleep at night just don't fully grasp the depth of the issue. They see homelessness as something abstract, something that happens to other people, but it's right in front of us and it's affecting a huge portion of the population.
Totally. And that's why we need a better solution, right? Housing, healthcare, job programs, addiction support, it's all part of the same issue. But a freeze like this doesn't address any of those things. It just pauses progress, which, when you think about it, is almost the opposite of what the city needs.
So, do you think that there's any chance the freeze will actually work in the long term, or is it just a temporary political move to satisfy a certain crowd?
I'm suspicious, honestly. It's hard to imagine this freeze leading to any kind of real sustained improvement. Unless they've got something huge planned in terms of alternative support systems, like actually improving mental health care or expanding affordable housing options for everyone, it just feels like a short-term fix.
And how long are they planning to keep this freeze in place anyway? I mean, there's no timeline yet, right? So, what's the end here? Just delay, delay, delay?
Exactly. It could go on for years, and in the meantime, people are still out on the streets, waiting for something to change. I mean, if we look at the other cities in Canada, for an example, Toronto or Calgary, they're all facing similar issues and still pushing forward with supportive housing initiatives, even though it's tough.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, if other cities are finding ways to build these housing units, why can't Vancouver? Like, it's not like we don't have the resources here. It just feels like we're choosing not to prioritize people in need.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is the political will. If the city leaders really are committed to solving this, they'd find a way to make it work. It's about making the issue a priority, and that's where it feels like they're dropping the ball.
I mean, what's the alternative? More tents? More people on the streets? Because that's what we're headed towards if we keep stalling. It's frustrating to watch, knowing that the solutions are there, we just have to act on it.
And the scary part is, the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be to fix this. The more complicated the problem gets, the more resources it'll take to reverse. So yeah, the freeze seems like a move that could cost the city in the long run.
So what's the next step? Do we just keep pushing for more supportive housing, or is there a bigger conversation we need to have about resources, zoning, and the public perception of homelessness?
I think we need to have a serious conversation about it all. Housing is just one part of the equation, but we also need to address the stigma, ensure proper funding for mental health and addiction services, and get the public on board with seeing homelessness for what it really is, a societal issue, not just an individual failure.
Agreed. It's going to take a lot of people working together to change the narrative.
I totally agree with that, but anyways, wow, that was quite a conversation.
Hey!
You need to be
Okay, fine, I'll just say it.
Yeah, can you?
I totally agree with that. But anyways, wow, that was quite the conversation we had going there, right, guys?
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to our spotlight segment. We'd like to bring the spotlight Wendy Carlick. Wendy Carlick is an Indigenous woman from Vancouver downtown's Eastside, whose story is one of the resilience and empowerment. Having faced years of homelessness, addiction, and the trauma of intergenerational colonial violence, Wendy found healing through cultural reconnection and support from the downtown Eastside Women's Center. The center provided her with a safe space and resources, including cultural programs that helped her rediscover her Indigenous heritage.
As she healed, Wendy became a passionate advocate for Indigenous women on the downtown east side, focusing on issues like addiction, homelessness, and systemic violence. Now she mentors other Indigenous women, helping them navigate their own healing journeys. Wendy's transformation from a woman struggling with addiction to a dedicated community advocate reflects the power of cultural support and self-determination in overcoming adversity.
Now that we've talked about how Wendy advocates for Indigenous people who are homeless, let's talk about how you can help them too.
In this episode, we're going to talk about the Aboriginal Coalition to End Homelessness. This charity is a Vancouver-based nonprofit dedicated to addressing the issue of homelessness within Indigenous communities. Their mission is to provide support, advocacy, and resources to Indigenous people experiencing homelessness with a focus on culturally sensitive care. ACEH works to create safe spaces, provide outreach, and offer mental and addiction recovery programs, while also advocating for policy change to improve housing and services for Indigenous peoples. By prioritizing Indigenous-led solutions and emphasizing the importance of cultural reconnection, ACEH is helping to empower individuals and communities to break the cycle of homelessness and achieve long-term stability. To donate to the Aboriginal Coalition to End Homelessness, check out our website under Donate Now at streetsense3.wordpress.com. So, let's work together to make Vancouver a community where no Indigenous individual must face homelessness alone.
Okay guys, before we wrap up this episode with our game show, we're going to play our streeter interview. We went around downtown Vancouver asking people this question:
How do you think people view homelessness in Vancouver, and what do you think we as individuals or the government can do about the situation?
Personally, I don't understand why they can't just get a job. Like, I have to work hard for my life. Why can't they just go on the street and expect me to give them money, bro? Like, they can just get a job. I don't understand.
I think people view homelessness as, oh, they're just lazy. If they wanted to, they could go get their own job. But homelessness is more than just getting a job.
I think people who've lived here for a long time are sort of used to it, which is kind of sad.
I feel like they kind of just view them as like homeless people as like a separate thing than we are. Almost as like a different species. Like it's a very cruel view.
I think people just look at them as more of like dirty people that chose drugs over anything when that's not true.
Homeless, like, are responsible for it, but they're the ones who kind of brought this like upon themselves, that it wasn't anything else.
I don't think they view it as positively.
Well, I think people view it as a huge problem. It's obviously
disgusting, right? I think they see these people and they're just like, ooh, shoo, right?
People kind of see it as like something dirty that needs to get rid of, that like we need to get rid of.
Like a huge financial divide where a lot of people have this mindset where they're like, oh, not in my backyard. Like I don't want to see that, like place them somewhere else. And it's sort of like a total disregard for this entire population.
This like hierarchy of rich people having the best time and then homeless people suffering.
But like it's not like their fault.
It's definitely a systemic thing. A lot of government, kind of more infrastructure needs to be in place.
The government should make affordable housing.
Just eat the rich, kill all of them.
I feel like the government should just open a mental health facility to try and help with that more than anything, because that's what most of the problems are.
Facing insecurity, and once you find yourself temporarily unhoused, I think it's a very slippery slope to find yourself permanently unhoused and compounding problems. So I think working on affordability and housing is a good way to stop the problem from getting worse for people who are vulnerable.
But it's also a lot harder. It's like easier said than done because a lot of these people are going through a lot of these issues and a lot of these things, right? So that's my short. Like, I just think that the government can definitely do a lot more to at least get them off the street, right? And then everything else will sort itself out eventually. But yeah.
So I think more long term needs to be done for the most part. Yeah.
Finally, the time that you guys have all been waiting for, our game show. We've talked about a lot of things in this episode, so let's test your street sense.
Question number 1. Which drug did Jean compare alcohol to in terms of how it's normalized in society? A. Marijuana, B. Tylenol, C. Lean, or D. Opioids? The correct answer is D. Opioids. Jean Swanson talked about how alcohol is normalized in a way that we don't do with substances like opioids. It's an interesting comparison, right?
Question 2. Why did the mayor announce a freeze on the new supportive housing projects? A. To build more affordable housing. B. To reevaluate zoning laws. C. To reduce homelessness. Or D. Because lack of funding. The correct answer is B. To reevaluate zoning laws. The mayor said they needed to take time to reassess zoning laws and community concerns before they move forward. But does this help the homelessness crisis? You decide.
Question 3. Which of the following costs could go up due to the freeze on new housing? A. Healthcare costs. B. Police services. C. Shelter costs. Or D. All of above. The correct answer is D, all of the above. When people don't have stable housing, they often rely more heavily on emergency services like hospitals, shelters, and police, which makes everything more expensive in the long run.
Question number 4. Which drug was mentioned as something that can be used more casually for medicinal purposes like pain management and anxiety? A. Pink cocaine. B. Marijuana. C. Lean. Or D. Penis envy mushrooms. The correct answer is B. Marijuana. Marijuana is becoming more widely accepted and is used to help with things like chronic pain and anxiety, which is a big shift in how society views it.
All right, last question. Question number 5. Who did Zoe say might not fully grasp the depth of homelessness because they don't have to worry about where they sleep at night? A. Politicians. B. Wealthy individuals. C. People with stable housing. D. Social workers. The correct answer is C. People with stable housing. Zoe pointed out that those who have a roof over their head might not fully understand the daily challenges that homeless individuals face. It's a reminder that we all need to get involved and help create change.
So, how did you do?
Whether you aced it or learned something new, we're so glad that you joined us today.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on
Street Sense!